Liza Lawrence here with episode 4, The Mysterious Doctor. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you are new to this podcast, here's what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives. Because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. Psalms 91, 11 and 12 says, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to guard thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands." This powerful episode involves premonitions of death, a mysterious doctor, the miracles of birth gone wrong, a physical healing of a child, and a life-saving prompting. I think you're really going to enjoy this one, but first, a shout out to our sponsor, BibleDice.com. Have you ever opened the Bible, or any book, to a random page to see what chance or providence had to say to you? Have you ever been led to read something that you needed in just that moment? On BibleDice.com, every time you click the Bible, a randomly selected scripture will appear. Hopefully, it's something that you need to know or to be reminded of that day. So I've been using BibleDice.com for about 6 or 7 years now. It's so uncanny. When I come to the website to seek a scripture, sometimes I'll use it as my daily devotional, and I'll click on the scripture and something so serendipitous will come up where I'll think, wow, that is exactly what I needed to hear. So check out BibleDice.com and see what messages God might have for you. So to begin, since we're talking about birth today, I wanted to share my miracle birth. This was a story that was told to me by my mother. I don't remember it, but it was a story that really helped comfort me in my times of struggle and the hard times in life, thinking, I really was saved for a purpose. So in my birth story, things seemed to be going well. My mother was in labor in the hospital, and all of a sudden, she started to hemorrhage. And they knew right away that the placenta had separated from the uterus. And they were concerned that me being without oxygen, and as you know, a child cannot go without oxygen for more than a couple of minutes without dying or having severe brain damage. So that was a real concern, was how long is this baby going to be okay before we need to get her out? And I had been in for several minutes. The doctor finally said, we can't wait any longer. He reached in and pulled me out. I must have been crowning, I hope. They were very concerned about the brain function of this brand new baby who had been without oxygen for several minutes. And after all the testing and monitoring of me as a newborn, I looked fine. And they thought, we wouldn't really know exactly how brain function is until she starts to develop. And as it turned out, I was perfectly healthy and developed absolutely normal. My mother's told me this story at every birthday. It's a tradition to hear our birth story. And I'm very much in awe that I was saved and that I was saved for a purpose. And that's something that has stuck with me my whole life. All right, so now we're going to go to the guests on our show. So I'm here with Rachel from Wisconsin, who is going to share a miracle story about the birth of one of her daughters. So Rachel, thanks for being on the show, and I'm so happy to hear this miracle story.
Thanks, Liza. So this was the birth of my third child, and my previous two, I'd never had complications with births or anything like that, so I wasn't going into it fearful, and the whole pregnancy seemed really good. We were in a new location, so I didn't know the doctor, and when I actually was looking for a doctor, I was really kind of struggling to find a doctor, and I was asking neighbors and other people who I should go, and no one had a good recommendation. So I finally just found a doctor that was close to me so that it was convenient and easy. And the first time I met this doctor, I actually had the impression or a premonition that he will not be the one delivering your baby. And I thought, that's really weird, but okay. And I just kind of brushed it aside. But it kind of just made me not worry so much about the doctor. But the whole pregnancy went great. Didn't have any complications or anything like that. Everything was going great. And then about 2 weeks before my due date, and with my other 2 children, I went a week overdue with both of them. So I wasn't anticipating anything.
And you were saying that you had a premonition earlier that you were maybe going to die. Tell me a little bit more about that.
It was actually about a month before, maybe even 2 weeks before this happened. So a month before the due date, that I got this impression of my husband coming home from the hospital without me. And he had 3 little children and no wife. And I just felt the burden that he would have with that weight. And I prayed to God and said, don't let him carry that burden. Let me stay. And I got this impression of, it's your choice. And it's your choice of what you want to do. But if you want to choose to stay, then that's fine. And it took me some time. I had to think about that because I genuinely thought, I don't want him to have this burden. I love my husband and I want to be with my kids, but life is hard. And it kind of felt relieving to think, hey, I could be done with this journey. Like, my role is done. I could be done if I wanted. But I thought hard and I thought, nope, I want to stay, and I want to stay and carry this burden with my husband. So I did, and the miracle happened.
Wow.
So 2 weeks before the due date, I was taking a nap on the couch, and my other 2 children were watching a little show there with me.
How old were your other 2?
My other 2 were 4 and 2.
So little toddlers still.
And they were just watching a little show, and I was taking a nap on the couch, and all of a sudden, I just knew something was wrong. I was wet, and I thought, my water broke. And so I stood up, and I went, this cannot be my water. And I realized that I was hemorrhaging, and I was hemorrhaging a lot. And so I quickly called the doctor and the doctor's office, and they asked me a bunch of questions, and they said, you get to the hospital right now. My husband was at work, and we only had 1 car.
And did he have the car?
He actually didn't have the car. I had the car, but I needed someone to watch my children.
Right.
And I needed him home to take me to the hospital.
Right.
So I immediately called him and said, I need you home right now. And I called my neighbor and said, can you come get the kids? And my husband, he couldn't find a ride, and I couldn't go and pick him up because I had to wait for the babysitter to come for my children, and I couldn't lift my kids, and I was hemorrhaging uncontrollably, so I was scared to move or do anything.
Right.
About 30 minutes later, my husband walked in the door, and at the same time as the babysitter, and I just said, get in the car right now, we need to leave. And we drove up to the hospital. It was about 20 minutes away. We went through the door, and they looked at me, and they said, I said, I'm here to have my baby. And they said, oh, honey, are you having contractions? And I said, no, I'm hemorrhaging. And they said, oh, let's just see. And they put me in a room, and instantly when they saw what was going on, panic-stricken. And I could just see everyone was panicking, and they were hooking me up to everything really fast. All these monitors, all these IVs, getting me prepped for everything, and asking me all these questions like, what did you do? Did you lift something heavy? And I said, no, I was taking a nap. And then they got monitors on the baby, and the baby's heart rate was perfect, just absolutely perfect. So they kind of calmed down a little bit and said, you know what, the baby's doing great. So we're going to kind of wait and see, as far as we don't want to do an emergency C-section if the baby's doing great, but we want to get your body going into labor. And so in walked this doctor that I had never met before in my life. And he introduced himself and said, and I honestly don't even remember his name now, but he said, "I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm going to break your water right now." And I kind of panicked and said, "I want an epidural. You can't break my water. If you break my water, I'm going to have a baby." And he says, "That's the point. We have to get your baby out now, or you and this baby will die."
And did they know at that point why you were hemorrhaging?
They had
just
no idea. They had no idea. They couldn't figure it out. They didn't know what was going on. And they didn't know because they hadn't broken the water. They didn't know if there was blood in the fluid or anything. Right. And so he broke my water, and the water came out actually clear. So that meant the baby was doing fine. But now they had the water broken, so they needed to get the baby out. And I was still hemorrhaging. So there was something going on. They could tell the baby was fine. Everything was fine internally except for I was hemorrhaging. The doctor was truly an angel because he would say things that just calmed me down instantly. Like things like, "You're going to be fine. Like, you are going to be watched over, and you and this baby are going to be protected." And my husband actually gave me a blessing, and the doctor was in the room, and the doctor said, "That is powerful stuff, and you will be protected." An hour later, they got the baby out, and I didn't have to do a C-section, which was so miraculous that my body just kicked into gear really fast. And
in 1 hour.
They got that baby out, and then I continued to hemorrhage after they got the baby out, and I went into shock from blood loss and things like that. But the miracle was that my third child was fine, and I was fine, and this doctor truly was the miracle. I felt that he was an angel because he came in, he knew exactly what to do, and he knew exactly what to say to help me have the mental strength to get through this panicky time, that I truly felt calm because of his presence. And after, I never saw the doctor again. He left the room. And I asked the nurses for his name, and after I went home with the baby and things like that, because then my doctor came up and checked on me and checked on the baby and did all of that the next day, I looked him up at the hospital to try and write him a thank you note, and I could not find him. Could not find his name, could not find his contact information, could not get a hold of this man to say thank you. So I truly believe that he was an angel sent to save me and my baby.
Yeah. I've read a lot of stories where in the medical field where people will just show up, nurses or doctors, and they're right at the right time to do certain things, and then they're gone and no one knows who they are. And I actually think that that's a very real possibility, that this doctor was an angel here sent to save you in that moment. Did they ever find out why you hemorrhaged? Did they know what happened?
No, they never did. So the baby came out fine, and the placenta, because that was another thing. Well, maybe you had a placenta that ruptured, or, something like that, placenta previa. But everything came out normal, perfectly fine. Ironically enough, with my fourth, I did the same thing.
Wow.
I hemorrhaged with my fourth baby, and they still can't figure out. That time, luckily, they were prepared because I had told them this happened with my third. I was induced with my fourth. It didn't happen until after labor that then I started hemorrhaging again. So that one was a little bit different, but they've never discovered why or what causes it or what happened. But they never knew.
Interesting. Did you learn anything from this experience? Has it helped you in your life since then?
That life is a choice, and we have choices, and we have to live intentionally with our choices of what we want, and that God honors those choices. I chose to stay, and I was grateful that He gave me that premonition of, this could be your out if you wanted it, and gave me that choice versus not having that choice. So I guess I've learned through this that God can work miracles if we want Him to, and if we choose to allow Him to. But He can work those miracles.
I love that. That's powerful. That's a powerful lesson. Thank you for sharing that with us. So our next guest on the show is Susie from Idaho, who's going to share a story of angels watching out for her child. Grateful to have you on the show. Glad you could be here, and let's hear your story.
Okay, thanks for having me, Liza. We had just moved into this rental house, and right across the street was a huge canal. And it was pretty quick moving water too. We had 5 little girls, and they were all fascinated with it, of course. So, I mean, the first week we were there, they were over there throwing rocks in it. And we actually had a neighbor come over and warn us and say, hey, there's been some tragedies in this, so I would just keep your kids away, which was very wise. So we made a rule that they couldn't play in the front yard. They could play in the backyard where it was fenced, but of course the water is so enticing. So we'd only been in that house a couple weeks, and one Sunday I was in the kitchen making dinner, and the girls had said, can we go out and rollerblade? And I had said no, because that's the front yard. You need to go to the backyard if you want to play. Well, they didn't listen.
Which, of course, children don't always listen, right?
Yeah, so they went out anyway. And their justification for it was, well, we have to check the mail. The mailbox was on the other side of the road, right next to the canal. And so they one of them put on rollerblades and went over there. She was about 5 or 6. And then she took with her a younger sister who was 3 at the time, almost 4. So they went out, and I didn't know. I thought they had listened and gone in the backyard. Well, a couple minutes later, the older sister comes running back into the house, just crying, hard to understand, just yelling, Whitney fell in the ditch. Whitney fell in the ditch. We finally got that. So my husband and I ran as fast as we could, which felt like slow motion, across the yard, across the road. And my husband actually had the thought to just start running, because the water was moving pretty quickly, to go down a way, not just straight across the road, but down a ways, because he thought she's for sure got to be carried down. But for some reason, I went straight just to see where I could see where she fell or what, conditions were, because I thought he was, covered that section. It must have happened quickly, but it always feels slower. I remember looking in the water, looking for an arm, looking for a hand, something, and seeing nothing. And then I hear this, Mommy? And I look down, probably within 2 feet of me. She's hanging on to grass. And so I picked her up. I mean, she was soaked, head soaked. So she had gone all the way under. And it was a deep canal, maybe 4 or 5 feet and 6 to 8 feet across. It was a big canal. And I do not know how she was hanging on to the grass with the current. And just with how small she was, she didn't know how to swim at all. Yeah, so I picked her up and just cried and brought her in and yelled to my husband, I've got her. Anyway.
So what were your emotions before you saw her? Do you remember what you were feeling when you had heard Whitney's in the ditch?
Scared. I was feeling like I was going to go find either a drowned little girl or half drowned that we'd need to rush to the hospital. And, just because I knew how deep the water was, how fast it was going, and how little she was, I just thought there's no chance. So, I mean, maybe she would still be alive, but needed to get water out of her, something like that. Best case scenario. So to see her hanging on to grass was pretty miraculous. So yeah, we went home and just cried and got her cleaned up and just hugged her. The next day was Memorial Day weekend, actually. And we went and visited some graves of family members. And I just sobbed the whole time thinking, oh, we could be doing this for Whitney. And I'm so grateful that she's here and we're not doing this for her. Yeah, I was kind of an emotional wreck. So I actually asked my husband for a priesthood blessing, which is something we do in our church. I love priesthood blessings because I know they're directly from God, a message to each of us when we need it. So I asked him for a blessing just to comfort. So he did. And in the blessing, it said that I had ancestors and angels watching over her, and that there was an ancestor there that helped her that day. And this is just the way I think, but I'm always like, I wonder who it was. Because the blessing did not tell me, but afterwards. Anyway, the blessing also said that I constantly have angels watching over family and that we are safe and protected, which was comforting to hear. Yeah, so later that day or the next day, I don't remember time frame on that, but I was pondering, I wonder who it was. And I felt the presence of my grandma, my dad's mom. Her name was Ruth. And her name popped into my head. And I thought, oh, because she had passed away probably 2 years previously. And we didn't quite make it up to her funeral in Canada, which I was really sad about. But anyway, I was a little shocked for some reason because I don't know why. I love that grandma. And I could hear her chuckling at me almost in my mind, like, oh, of course I would do something like that for you, you know. She's a funny lady. She had the best laugh ever, just a deep chuckle. Anyway, it was a sweet experience to know she's still involved in our lives and that we have that protection. So yeah, that's our miracle.
That is an awesome miracle. How did Whitney, what were her thoughts? Did she say anything about it? Did she feel any angel presence or anything? Did she mention anything like that?
No, she was pretty little and she's a very quiet, introverted person. Yeah, a week before or a week later, I can't remember for sure, but there was another little boy about the same age in the same area who did drown and didn't make it. And it was heartbreaking. And we were thinking about that and just crying. And she did look up at me with her big blue eyes and say, "Mommy, why did that little boy and not me?" And I just thought, I don't know. Except that I know God has a different purpose for each of us, and hers was to stay and his was to go home. That's all I could tell her. But that was all she said about me, which actually is pretty deep for a 4-year-old.
I was going to mention that story and the wonderment of why do some children die in tragic ways and others are rescued or saved, and we just don't know. We don't know God's plan. We don't know what his purposes are for each of us. And so that is pretty profound for a little 3-year-old to recognize that and to question and wonder, why was I saved? And hopefully in her life, as she gets older, that might comfort her in her times of struggle of, you know what, I'm here for a reason. I was saved. I'm here for a reason. So my next guest on the show is anonymous, which I'd like to remind everyone, if you'd like to remain anonymous to tell your story, you are completely welcome to. So he's going to share a story that happened to him in high school on his senior celebration. So thanks for being on the show, and let's hear your story.
Thank you. So you called it a senior celebration, popularly known as the kegger, where I came from. This story, it shows that God will reach out to us even if we're not behaving the best, and will sometimes save us from our own stupidity. I grew up in a rural town and in a pretty small school, and I wasn't a partier by any means, but on this particular occasion I was. And so I wasn't a bad kid, but I didn't always make the best decisions. And on this occasion was such a time when I didn't make great decisions. Me and my friends and a bunch of others in the senior class, very small senior class, we went up to a Forest Service cabin, kind of in the remote woods. Of course, there was a lot of alcohol there, and it was flowing freely, and I was a participant in that. As the night progressed, it got to the point where it was time to go to sleep in this cabin, and it was a pretty primitive cabin, no plumbing to speak of. It was just a cabin out in the woods, and it had a big loft. So we all kind of went in and things wound down, and we crawled into bed, and literally crawled because you had to go up a ladder, and it took a lot of effort to get up that ladder because we were pretty drunk. We were under the influence. And so just climbing up that ladder was a great effort to get into this loft. So we go up there and we just kind of crash.
Now, how many were there?
So there were probably 15 of us there.
Okay.
And so some of us were going to sleep up in the loft, some of us downstairs, and then just wherever anyone crashed. It wasn't very well planned. But so me and a few friends were going to get sleep up in the loft. So we went up there and just fell asleep, literally just crashed. And then, like I say, we were pretty drunk. I mean, one of my friends passed out, and anyway, it wasn't pretty. Well, what I didn't know is that someone else in their own stupid drunken state had set, there was a wood stove inside this cabin, and it was the spring, and it was still pretty cold up in the woods, and there someone had built a fire, and so the wood stove was hot. Well, someone else had set a bottle of, like, I think it was like aspirin or ibuprofen or something like that in preparation for the next day's hangover. Anyway, they had set the bottle on this wood stove, and it just melted and turned into this gooey, melted mass. And it didn't actually ignite, but it was just spewing this black smoke into this cabin. And of course, smoke and heat rise, and it was just filling the loft area of this cabin with this toxic black smoke. I mean, I really don't remember anything. At one moment I'm sleeping, and then all of a sudden I just wake up instantly with this thought in my mind, this phrase, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Like, wake up, something is wrong. And so I woke up with that on my mind. I said, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I'm shaking my friends. And that's all I'm saying over and over again. Something's wrong. And I'm shaking them awake. And then by that time we kind of start to wake up. We can just smell this thick smoke. We were able to crawl down. We pretty much fell out. We were falling down this ladder, trying to get out as fast as we could. We went out. And of course, the alcohol now mixed with that toxic smoke, we all just went out of the cabin and threw up. I mean, it was just disgusting. It was horrible. We were nauseous. They all said, like, how did you wake up? How did you know to wake up? And I said, I don't know. It was just like something told me something's wrong. And I just woke up. And, normally when someone is asleep, drunk, they don't just wake up for no reason. It's somewhat difficult to wake up out of that state. And anyway, I just felt like, even though I was being stupid and making bad decisions, that there was someone looking out for me, and that even in my drunken state, that I could be reached with that message to wake up and get out. Because I don't know, I'm not saying the cabin would have burned down or anything like that, but if we had just slept up there in that toxic smoke, I don't know what might have happened. We could have gotten seriously ill. I mean, I know people asphyxiate under those conditions. I don't know what terrible thing could have happened, but we were able to get out in time. I've always thought that was kind of an interesting miracle, because I wasn't in a spiritual state of mind, yet I still felt looked after with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sobering, no pun intended. It was, it was something to reflect on, that
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe the Lord was saying, we're going to help him through this stupid moment so that he can go on to have, a decent life.
Yeah. Do you have any idea who it might have been? Do you have ancestors that have passed on, or guardian angels? Any ideas? Or just do you attribute that to the general idea of God?
In my religious tradition, we just called that the Spirit, hearing the voice of the Spirit. And so that's just how I thought of it. I didn't feel like it was connected to any particular person or, ancestor. I think it certainly could have. I do believe that, our guardian angels are comprised of our family members who've passed on. And so I think it definitely could have been that, but I didn't have any sense of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. And it is interesting how even in our apparently bad behavior, if you will, that the Spirit could still reach you and save you potentially from your stupidity.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and for the awareness that God loves us even if we're making mistakes, and can reach us even in those moments.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so that's our show for today. I really loved how these stories highlighted potential angels and God's intervention in our lives. So thanks for sharing this time with me. Next week on Miracle Monday, we're going to listen to a story of a man who had a near-death experience out in the middle of the wilderness on a 4-day hike and expedition. And we're going to hear from his perspective what happened, and also from another man's perspective that was there on the hike with him, and the miraculous things that fell into place and all the little miracles that took place to rescuing this man. So I'm really thrilled to share that with you next week. So make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss it. I'd also love your support in spreading the word about wonders and miracles. The best way to do that is to give this podcast a 5-star rating, write a review, share it with your friends and family on your social media or through your email. I'd love to inspire and uplift millions, but I can't do that without your help and support. I'd like to give one more quick shout out to our sponsor, BibleDice.com. Check that website out and see if God has any messages for you. Psalms 91, 11 and 12 says, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to guard thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands." I hope you consider sharing your miracle stories. I know these stories can be very personal and they are often very sacred, but consider that it might bless and edify the lives of others that might be hearing it. I can't wait to hear how God has shown up in your life. If you'd like to be on the show, remember, please submit a story on wondersandmiracles.com. So check out my website. Also check out my Facebook page, Wonders and Miracles. Join the conversation there. I'd love to hear your favorite part of this episode. And as always, remember to notice and celebrate the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.